I found her on a Tuesday. Don't know why I remember the day. I don't usually bother with the white man's calendar. But that summer we'd been trading with the army post at Fort Laramie, and I'd started marking time the way they did, scratching the days into a post near the lodge door. Tuesday. The sun was just past mid-morning and the alkali flats were already shimmering. She was sitting against a rock. Not hiding behind it. Sitting against it the way a person leans on something. Because standing up doesn't feel worth the effort anymore. She didn't run when she saw me. Didn't scream. That was the first thing I noticed. No scream, no scrambling, no prayer to her God. She just watched me ride toward her with these eyes that had already seen the worst thing and were past being afraid. I'd seen eyes like that on warriors after a bad fight. That emptied-out look. Her dress was what had been a dress. Calico, maybe. Once blue, but so torn and sun-bleached, it was closer to rags now, stiff with dust and something darker along the left side. She was barefoot. Feet were cracked open in the way. Feet crack when they walk on hardpan for days without water. One ankle looked bad, swollen and dark. She was thin. Not trail thin, not pore thin, but the kind of thin where you can see what's underneath the skin, where the bones press out and the hollow of the throat is a shadow you could put your thumb in. I swung down off the horse. I didn't say anything. Out there, words felt wrong anyway. I just walked to her slow, the way you'd walk to a spooked animal, and I crouched down in front of her to be eye level. She watched me. I took the water skin from my belt. The good one, the elk bladder one my wife had made 12 years before she died. And I held it out. She looked at it for a long time. Long enough that I wondered if she'd lost her mind entirely. Then she took it with both hands. Both hands, like a child learning to drink from a cup, and she drank. Slow at first, then too fast, and I reached out and put my palm gentle on the skin so she'd slow down again. She did. She looked at me over the rim of it, and I saw she understood. I gave her dried meat from my pouch. Buffalo, from the summer hunt. She ate it the same way. Slow at first, because her body didn't know it had food again, then fast. Then I slowed her down again with a look. I asked her what happened. She just stared at me. I asked again. In English this time. My English wasn't perfect then, better now. I said, "What happened to you?" Nothing. Not a sound. Not even a shrug. She looked at me the way I imagine a person looks when they've taken a wound so deep, the body doesn't know what to do with it yet. Not shock exactly, because shock passes, but something past shock, something that had settled in and decided it lived there now. I had heard of this. My grandmother had a word for it. I won't write that word here, because it was a sacred kind of word, but the idea of it was, when the spirit leaves the mouth, when the voice goes somewhere inside and locks the door. You see it sometimes after the worst things, after massacre, after watching your people die, after the kind of grief that doesn't have a face you can put on it. I stood up, looked around at the flats, at the distance, at the sky. No buzzards yet, which meant she hadn't been down long enough. A day, maybe two. I looked at her ankle, at the dried blood on her side. That one worried me. That side wound, though it looked like it had closed on its own, probably from pressing herself against that rock for however long she'd been there. I looked at her a long time. She was watching me decide. I didn't make a show of it. I just said in English, "Come with me." And when she didn't move, I reached down and picked her up. She weighed almost nothing, which made something in my chest do a thing it hadn't done in a long while, some combination of anger and grief that I didn't have a name for. And I settled her up onto my horse, and I mounted up behind her, and I turned us back north toward the village. She didn't say a word the whole ride. An hour and a half. She sat in front of me very still, and she watched the landscape go by, and once, when the horse stepped sideways to avoid a rattlesnake hole, she grabbed my forearm with one hand, hard, then let go. That was all. My name is Standing Bear. My mother gave me that name because I was born late in the season when bears were starting to slow, and she said, I came into the world quietly and opened my eyes and looked around like I was just getting the lay of the land before I committed to anything. I've been chief of my band for 11 years. Before that, I rode with the warriors, and before that, I was a boy who helped my father with the horses and watched the old men for signs of what kind of man to be. I was not young when I found her, 53 that summer. My hair was already starting to silver at the temples. My knees hurt in the cold months. My wife had been dead 6 years and my children were grown, and I ran my band the way you run anything that matters to you. Carefully, with the long view, with more care for what happens after you're gone than for what's easy right now. I'm telling you this because what happened with her is easier to understand if you know that I was not a soft man. Not a man who did things for reasons he didn't examine first. When I brought her to the village, I'd already thought it through on the ride back. Not all of it. You can't think all of it through in an hour and a half, but the basic shape of it. She was alive. She was hurt. She had nowhere to go, and leaving her there to die on Alkali Flats was not something I was going to do. The village is not what you're imagining. Maybe it is. Lodges, cook fires, the smell of hides being worked, dogs, children, the sound of women talking to each other across the distance between their fires. The sounds of a community that has been doing this long enough that it has its rhythms. When I rode in with her, there was a silence that went out from us in a wave. Not hostile, just careful. My people knew me well enough to read the set of my shoulders, and my shoulders were saying, "This is what we are doing now, and we are not discussing it." My daughter Singing Water came to us first. She was 26 that summer, already a mother herself, quick and capable. She looked at the woman, looked at me, looked at the woman's feet, the ankle, the side wound, and she started giving orders to the younger women before I'd even dismounted. The woman, I didn't know her name yet, didn't know if I'd ever get it, let herself be led away. She went with Singing Water, the way a person goes when they've used up all their resistance to things. Passive. Trusting in the way that has nothing left to be suspicious with. I watched them take her into the lodge that had been empty since my wife's sister moved to her husband's band 2 winters ago. Singing Water already had a fire going in there, already had water heating. I took my horse to the picket line and rubbed him down and thought about what I'd done. I didn't regret it. That's the truth of it. Some things you do because there's no other way you could live with yourself if you didn't, and this was one of those things. The only question now was what happened next. The first week she slept most of it. Singing Water told me the ankle wasn't broken, just badly sprained, and the wound in her side was a knife cut, long-healed and scarred over, probably 2 weeks old, clean now. She was badly dehydrated, and her body was trying to put itself back together from the inside out. She didn't speak. Not to Singing Water, not to the other women who brought food, not when I came in the mornings to check on her. I came in the mornings because someone needed to, and Singing Water had her own children to see to. I came in, and I crouched near the entrance, and I talked to her in a low, easy voice. Not asking her questions, just talking. The kind of talking that doesn't require an answer. What the weather was doing. What was happening in the village that day. Once, a long story about a horse I'd had as a young man who had a stubborn streak that had humiliated me in front of my father more than once. I don't know if she understood all of it. She looked at me and she listened, and sometimes, at certain points, something moved behind her eyes. On the 8th day she ate sitting up without help. On the 10th day she was at the lodge entrance, watching the village when I came in the morning. She looked out at the children playing and the women working and the dogs doing what dogs do, and her face was not peaceful, not easy, present in a way it hadn't been before. Like she was beginning to believe the place was real. I came and sat beside her. Not too close. We sat there together for a while in the morning light. She reached out and touched the back of my hand, just touched it, then pulled back, didn't say anything. Her name was Ida. I learned this 2 weeks in when Singing Water, who had more patience than me in this particular direction, managed to get her to write it. Singing Water had sat with her and drawn pictures in the dirt. A person, a house, fire. And eventually she'd taken the stick and written in the dirt, very small, the letters IDA. Singing Water came to tell me like it was important news. It was, Ida. I turned the name over in my mind, tried it out loud once, just to myself, alone outside the village. Ida, it was a soft name, a careful name. I'd been calling her nothing, the woman when I spoke of her to others. I hadn't wanted to give her a name until she could give me one herself. That felt important to me in a way I couldn't fully articulate. Like her, name was her thing to give, not mine to assign. I used it that morning when I brought the food around. Ida, I said, and held out the bowl. She looked up at me fast. The first quick movement I'd seen from her, the first instinctive thing, the way a person turns at the sound of their own name before they've decided to. She nodded. Once, that nod hit me somewhere I didn't expect. She got stronger through July, slow but steady. The ankle healed. The hollows in her face filled in a little. She started helping around the camp. Small things at first, then more substantial ones. She was good with her hands, good with fire, better than good with horses, which surprised me. The first time she walked into the picket line, and one of the younger stallions came to her. She put her hand on his nose in a particular way, very flat and still, like she'd done it 1,000 times, and he let out a breath and dropped his head. I watched that from a distance, and I thought, this is a woman who knows horses. And anything else that happened to her, at some point in her life she was cared for, well enough to learn how to be gentle with animals. That should have been a small thing. It wasn't. She still didn't speak. July became August. She moved through the village now, like she was tentatively choosing to be part of it. Not belonging, not fully, but not separate either. The children were the ones who got close to her first. They always are. 2 of Singing Water's daughters had appointed themselves her particular friends, and could be found near her at all hours, showing her things, leading her to things, demanding her attention with the uncomplicated directness of children who don't yet understand why an adult would be sad. She was good with them, patient and still and willing to be pulled around. Once I came around the side of a lodge and found her sitting in the dirt with both girls, while the younger one tried to braid her hair, and her face. Her face had a thing on it that wasn't quite a smile, but was working toward one. The muscles weren't used to it. You could see that. It was there. I stood and watched that for a moment longer than I needed to. There were men in my band who did not like her presence. I will not pretend otherwise. We had been at peace with the nearby settlers for 2 seasons. Peace is a thing that has to be chosen fresh every day, and not everyone chooses it the same way. 2 of my elder warriors came to me in August with their concerns. Old Crow and his brother-in-law, Red Cloud's passing. Good men, serious men. Men I respected. They sat with me at my fire, and they said their piece, that the white woman was a danger to us. That if settlers came looking for their own, they would not look carefully at why she was here, they would see only what it looked like. And my judgment was trusted, but this particular judgment put the whole band in a difficult position. I listened to all of it. Then I said, she stays until she tells me otherwise, or until she's strong enough for whatever comes next. That is my decision, and it is made. Old Crow looked at me a long time. Then he nodded. He didn't agree, but he accepted it. That was all I needed from him. Truth was, I didn't know what came next. I didn't know where she'd come from. Didn't know if she had family somewhere. Didn't know if she wanted to go back to whatever life she'd had, or whether there was anything left of that life to go back to. I didn't know, because she hadn't told me. Because she couldn't. And I was not willing to push her towards something. She wasn't ready for just to make things tidier. August 21st. I remember it because of the stars that night. There was a meteor shower and most of the village was outside watching. Shh. And the children were running in circles pointing up. And there was the kind of happiness in the air that happens when people are all looking at the same beautiful thing together, I was sitting apart from the main group, on a rise above the camp. Did this, sometimes, sat above it, and looked down at it. My band, my people. The fires and the voices and the shapes of them moving. You carry something like that, you want to look at it sometimes. Make sure it's still whole. I heard her before I saw her, the particular sound of her step. Lighter on the left, because of the ankle that still gave her a small amount of trouble at the end of long days. She came up the rise, and she stopped a few feet from me, and she looked out at the village and up at the sky. We sat there for a while. Then she said, I had a farm. I didn't move, didn't turn my head, I just waited. Her voice was, I want to say rusty, but that's not quite it. It was like something that had been still for a long time and was moving away carefully, testing whether the mechanism still worked. Low and a little rough, she said. South of here, my husband and my son. She stopped, a long pause, she said. They came in the night. White men, not yours. Outlaws, I want you to know that. I know what you might think, she said. I ran, she said. I ran and I kept running, and I don't know for how long. She stopped again. I looked at the sky. Above us a meteor went bright and then gone, she said. Couldn't talk after. Didn't seem like anything that needed saying. I looked at her then. She was looking at the village, at the fires, at the children who were still awake past when they should have been, chasing each other in and out of the light, she said. You didn't have to, I said. I know, she said. But you did. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say to that. She reached out. She was sitting close enough now that she could reach, and she put her hand on my forearm, the same spot as that day on the horse, and this time she didn't pull back. I want to be clear about what happened after that, because I've learned that people who hear this story sometimes misunderstand it. What happened after that was not simple. Nothing that follows real grief ever is. She stayed through the fall. She helped with the harvest work and the winter preparations. She learned what words she needed in Lakota and taught Singing Water's daughters English songs, which they sang with tremendous enthusiasm and no comprehension, and the whole camp could hear them at odd hours singing about things like sailing, ships, and green meadows in voices that had absolutely no idea what the words meant. She smiled when she heard them. She helped with something I had been struggling with all summer, which was a translation problem with the army post. There were treaty papers and I could speak English well enough for conversation, but the papers had a kind of legal language in them that bent and hid its meaning, and she could read that language. She sat with me for 3 evenings at my fire, and we went through those papers, word by word, and she told me what they actually said versus what the interpreter had said they said. They were different. The papers and what the interpreter said, not so different as to be outright lies, but different in the way that a stone looks like it will make a smooth step. And then you put your weight on it and it moves. Because of what she told me, I did not sign those papers. I sent back a different set of terms. The army captain was unhappy about this. I was not troubled by the captain's unhappiness. My elder warriors, including Old Crow, said nothing directly to me about any of this. But Old Crow's brother-in-law came to me at the horse pickets one morning and said quietly that he understood now why she had stayed, and he was glad she had. That was enough, she grieved. I want to say that plainly. Because sometimes when I tell pieces of this story, people think the hard part happened in the desert and ended there. It didn't. The hard part had a long tail. She grieved her husband and her son through the whole autumn. Not every day, not in a way that stopped her from functioning. But it was there, this weight she was carrying, and sometimes it showed. She didn't talk about it with me much, except once. Once in October, when the first real cold had come, and the camp was quieter in the evenings, she told me her son's name. She said it once, just the name, and then she looked at the fire for a while. I said the name back to her, carefully. She nodded. After a while she said, "You lost someone too." It wasn't a question. Singing Water must have told her. Maybe she just understood it the way you recognize a thing that rhymes with your own experience, I said. 6 years ago, she said. Does it get better? I thought about lying. thought about giving her the comfortable version. She was a woman who had walked barefoot across alkali flats with a knife wound in her side and hadn't died. She didn't need comfortable. I said, it gets different. There's more space around it eventually. It doesn't take up every breath. She was quiet for a long time. She said, okay, just that. Okay. Like she'd taken that and filed it somewhere she'd be able to find it. November. The snows came early. The kind of winter that settles in like it means to stay. She was staying too. I want to be clear that this was her decision. I made certain of that. Around the time the first hard frost came, I sat down with her and I said, spring will come. When it does, if you want to go, I will give you a horse and supplies, and I will send 2 of my men to see you safely to the nearest settlement. If there is family somewhere, people looking for you, if you want to build your life back in the direction it was. She looked at me a long time. She said, is that what you want? I said, what I want is not the question. She said, I'm asking what you want. I looked at the fire. Outside the lodge, the wind was starting to pick up. You could hear it finding the edges of things. I said, I want you to have a life that is your own choosing, she said. This is my own choosing. She said it plain. Not soft, not careful, not as a hope or a question. As a fact, the way you'd state the weather. This is my own choosing. I looked at her. She looked back. Whatever that look was, we held it a long time. Then she said, shh. I'm going to need to learn to make that soup your daughter makes. The one with the dried corn. I've been trying to figure out what she puts in it, and she won't tell me. And she won't tell me. I said, she won't tell me either. It was my wife's recipe, she said. Then we'll figure it out together. I'm older now. More than I was then by 15 years. My knees hurt worse in the cold. My hair is more silver than black. The band is larger than it was that summer. 2 other families joined us in the years after. Each is its own story. And the world around us has changed in ways I don't always understand, and sometimes don't like. And the pace of that change, and the only seems to go in one direction. Ida's hair is gray now too. She still knows horses better than most of my men. She still helps me with any document that comes from the army or the government, sitting at my fire with the papers in her lap and her finger tracking the lines, telling me where the language is bending and where it is honest. She is still patient with children, though her great patience now is with her own grandchildren. Singing Water's youngest daughter married a good, young man from the Cheyenne band to the west, and the children from that union spend a great deal of time in our lodge, being very loud and demanding. She seems to find this satisfactory. There are people outside my band who do not understand what my life is, see it, and draw their conclusions and move on. White settlers who look at the shapeds of us and decide they know the story. Army men who have a particular idea of what an Indian chief's life should look like. Even some within the Lakota nation who think I made an unusual choice all those years ago and have always been mildly baffled that it worked out. Let them think what they think. Here is what I know. I found a woman dying in the desert, and I brought her home and I fed her, and I waited for her to find her voice again. That is all I did. Whatever she found here, whatever she built here, she built herself. The credit for that is hers. She has said to me, more than once over these 15 years, that she would not have built any of it without being found first. I don't argue with her. She's usually right about most things. What I tell people, when they ask me what happened, and people do ask, especially the young men who want to understand what it means to do the right thing even when it's complicated. What I tell them is this. I found her on a Tuesday, and she had nothing left. No voice, no water, no hope that the world was going to keep her in it. And I decided that not going to be the end of her story. It wasn't. She is sitting across from me right now as I tell this, working on something with her hands. One of those braiding tasks she does in the evenings that I have watched 1,000 times without ever learning how it's done. She is not paying attention to my voice or pretending not to. Face is the face I know better than any face on earth. The face that was hollow and emptied out when I first saw it, that has filled in over 15 years, with the particular weight of a life being lived. In a little while she'll look up at me the way she does, not for any reason, just to look. And that look, I can't describe it except to say that it lands in the chest every time, the same as the first time, like something being recognized, like a man being seen for exactly what he is and told, yes, it's enough. It has always been enough, you are enough. I don't know how a man earns a thing like that. I don't know if earn is even the right word. I only know I would find her again. Any desert, any Tuesday, I would ride toward that rock, and I would get down off my horse, and I would hold out the water skin. I would do it every time.